After the AZ5 button was pressed, the unimaginable thing happened. Soon after, Dyatlov took the command. Restore the coolant flow, switch on the emergency pumps, turn on the exhaust fans to get rid of thick clouds of steam and smoke, open the gates of the coolant pipe valves. At the end of that series of commands, Dyatlov said, "Lads, we've got to get water into the reactor." Hello guys, last time we had our first episode about the Chernobyl Operators. As you may have already noticed because of the title, today we continue and we plan to cover at least 4 to 6 episodes in this mini-series right away, with more videos planned for the future of course. In the previous episode, I spoke a bit about the history of Chernobyl nuclear power plant, without too many details as we already made a whole mini-series about it. We just covered the timeline and some particular key points, like why the reactors were constructed and commissioned separately. We reintroduced you to some very well-known people like Anatoly Dyatlov or Aleksandr Yuvchenko, but you may not know Boris Stolyarchuk for example. As always, I encourage you to watch the previous episode before or after this one. It's important, but you will learn something new from today even if you didn't watch the number 1. Lastly, in the previous video, we told you about the moment the operators realized that the scram button, the infamous AZ5, didn't work as it should. There were enormous amounts of energy released because of the flaws in the reactor's design, and today, we pick up the story closely after the RBMK number 4 was already gone and beyond the point of repair. Let's start. Chernobyl Operators, Part 2. The aftermath. Despite taking almost every measure they knew about, including AZ5 button, which was pressed by Toptunov, Chernobyl operators were not seeing the suspected outcome. The faulty RBMK design was not helping. They were accustomed to waiting at least a few seconds before any measuring equipment registered a significant change, even after operators used a drastic control option. Seconds after seconds, they didn't know what was going on, including Deputy Chief Engineer Dyatlov, who was supervising the reactor's test on that night. After seeing that the control rods were stuck, he didn't need more time to acknowledge one thing: they wouldn't move on their own now. In pure desperation, Dyatlov sent 2 trainee engineers up to the reactor hall. Their task was to complete the scram procedure manually, meaning to force the control rods into the core by hand. Moments after the 2 trainees left, it was clear to all personnel in the control room of Unit 4 that it made no sense. Even Dyatlov realized it. The control rods had clutches which determined whether they could freely slide into the reactor. Operators released them, and just by the force of gravity, the rods should go straight in and shut down the nuclear fission. But even with the clutches released, the rods didn't move anymore. That meant one thing: if the enormously heavy rods couldn't slide into the core, the 2 trainees would never be able to make them move anyway. Viktor Proskuryakov and Aleksandr Kudrya were trainee reactor control engineers. They were there just to observe the test and to learn. Here is an interesting thing which could change your view on Dyatlov a bit, if you haven't watched our 4-episode miniseries about him yet. Despite how he was held responsible for the whole disaster, and despite how HBO pictured him in Chernobyl, he was actually a really good expert. Not so good of a leader, but definitely not a bad and corrupted man. A second after realizing his command made no sense, he ran out of the control room to stop the trainees. He made it to the corridor and shouted, but they disappeared in the clouds of smoke and steam that were covering a significant part of the building by now. When he couldn't call back Viktor and Aleksandr, he came back to the control room and took the command. If you didn't know it, Dyatlov was supervising the test, but it was Akimov who was the chief of the night shift in Unit 4. So, despite him being present, Dyatlov was actually supervising, and he was not interfering as much as the HBO showed. He ordered Akimov to dismiss all non-essential personnel who were still holding their posts. One of those was Leonid Toptunov, the young senior engineer who pressed the scram AZ5 button. When they left the room, Dyatlov wanted to restore coolant flow, so he ordered Akimov to switch on the emergency pumps. Having in mind how the whole building was covered in smoke, he also ordered to turn on the smoke exhaust fans. Lastly, Dyatlov wanted the gates of the coolant pipe valves opened. As for the witnesses, at the end of that flow of commands, Dyatlov said, "Lads, we've got to get water into the reactor." At the same moment, in a different part of a building number 4, Aleksandr Yuvchenko was trying to understand what happened. Seconds earlier, he felt the huge shockwave which shook him and the whole building. He was in the senior engineer's room, which didn't have any windows, so lights turning off and on had to be scary given the place he worked in. He must have suspected that something terribly wrong had happened. The doorway was shattered into pieces and a horrifying hissing sound reached him through that hole. His first reaction, good in a normal situation, was to call the unit's control room. He dialed the internal number, but no one responded. The line was dead. But the phone was working because he got called from the control room of Unit 3. Was it a malfunction? Was it an attack? What had happened to leave these kinds of damages? He picked up the phone and some voice shouted a short command: "Bring stretchers immediately." Despite a complete lack of information about the situation, he did exactly that. He took a stretcher and ran downstairs. He almost jumped the whole stairway down when he was stopped by some strange figure. He looked upon it. Clothes blackened, either from a thick smoke that was getting everywhere or from a fire. Shoes partially destroyed. Stains of blood were running down the arms and legs. Yuvchenko couldn't recognize the face. It was changed by some kind of unknown injury. This strange person spoke something, and however Aleksandr couldn't understand it at first. Thanks to the voice itself, he finally recognized who was standing in front of him. It was his friend, Viktor Dektyarenko, the coolant pump operator. He was barely standing, not even trying to straighten up, and leaning against the wall. Aleksandr wouldn't leave him, but he heard some bad news from Dektyarenko. There were others who needed his help. Yuvchenko left him there and used his flashlight to find a way, but it was not very helpful. The thick smoke covered most of the rooms, halls and corridors. In a matter of minutes, he came upon another operator. He was still standing near a pile of wreckage, but Aleksandr could tell that he was barely able to walk. Covered in debris, almost completely covered by black smoke, wet and burned because of the steam escaping the destroyed pipes. Yuvchenko saw it clearly. This man was in complete shock. Yet, the injured operator said he was alright. Then, he pointed his finger at some distant place. "Help Khodemchuk. He's in the pump room." It's still unimaginable to me how the people who were trapped in that place had to feel. Most of them were probably in shock, yet they still tried to help others or at least make the situation less dangerous. That tragic event took the lives of many. I often wondered if they knew what was happening. After all, they were working in a nuclear power station and they could suspect their lives were in danger. Despite their bravery and the strong sense of duty to help others, some of the Chernobyl operators were buried under tons of debris. And to this day, their bodies are trapped in the enclosed Unit 4 building, under the 2 sarcophaguses. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can try to remember the names as some of them will appear in the next video too. If you want to know more, check out 3 of our miniseries about RBMK, Dyatlov, and the Chernobyl and Pripyat history. You can find them either on separate playlists or in the main tab on our channel. Check out our game, Chernobylite, if you haven't done so already. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter or TikTok. There will be happening a lot in the upcoming weeks and months. That's it for today, guys. Take care, stay safe, and see you next week.